very disappointed in, as others are, rightly so, in this unilingual message of the CEO of Air Canada.
I think Canadians have a right to expect service in both official languages.
We have the CEO who don't care about French because 5 years ago been asked to learn French, at least for this statement.
This isn't the first time that he's been told to speak French, and he should know better.
It showed a lack of empathy and a lack of sensitivity. And in that sense, I think it's a question of moral leadership.
Unacceptable.
Significant political pushback on Parliament Hill there to the Air Canada CEO's English-only message to families affected by the fatal plane crash earlier this week. Late Sunday night, an Air Canada jet coming from Montreal collided with a fire truck while landing at New York's LaGuardia Airport, killing the 2 pilots and injuring 41 people. The next day, Air Canada CEO Michael Rousseau recorded a video to address the tragedy.
First, and most importantly, I want to express our deepest sorrow for everyone affected. Our efforts are focused on the
Few have taken issue with that sentiment, but the CEO has received criticism for how he communicated it. In the 4-minute video, Rousseau spoke almost no French except for 2 words, bonjour and merci. It's not only federal politicians who are slamming the video. The Office of the Commissioner of Official Languages confirms to CTV News it has received almost 800 complaints about this. Rousseau is being summoned to testify at the House of Commons Official Languages Committee to explain why he spoke only in English. And in Quebec, Premier François Legault's government is calling for Rousseau to resign.
Well, Mr. Rousseau have made a big lack of respect for all of French-speaking people in Canada, including Quebecers, but including Francophone, coast to coast from Canada. Canada should ask him to resign from office.
Do you think it's normal that after 5 years he was not able...
Christopher Skeete is Quebec's International Relations Minister. Hi, Minister. Welcome to the program. Good to see you as always.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you making the time. The Premier of your province today called on Mr. Rousseau to resign. Why?
Well, you know, we have a Canadian company where we're supposed to live in a bilingual country, a company that's based in Montreal, a person who is not at his first offense with regards to his inability to speak the language of our country. And so it seems as though he hasn't learned the lesson that he wasn't, you know, that he promised he would fix. And so I find it very disappointing that a few years on, I think it's more than 3 years ago, he promised he would take French classes, he'd do better, he'd be better. And yet, once again, he's just unable to even draft a message of sympathy to Quebecers who were on that plane. I know people that I work with on a day-to-day basis who were on that plane who got hurt. He can't even draft a statement in French. I think it's unacceptable, and I think it's the straw that breaks the camel's back.
For people watching who may not know exactly what you're referencing, it's a speech he gave back, I think it was in 2021, in downtown Montreal, where he also didn't speak any French, and he got a lot of pushback for that at the time, like quite a bit. And he promised at the time to learn French and to be better equipped, and that never materialized.
Well, think about that, right? So imagine 3 years ago, you're at your place of work, and I know the people in your audience work very hard. You're at your place of work, and you make a mistake. Somebody says, hey, you know, you shouldn't have said it this way, or, you know, you really need to learn the language of your customers, which represent about 25% of the population, and where your headquarters is based. And so you say, yeah, you know what, my bad, I have to do better, I'll do better, I'll take classes. And 3 years later, at a moment where it's really important to show the progress that you've made, you're just not able to do it. That's where we are today, Vashi. And I think, you know, the families of the pilots and the families of those who were hurt deserved to hear the condolences from the president of the company on a Quebec flight that was landing in the U.S. to be addressed in the language of Quebec. And I think it's just very difficult for me to understand how a person who can live in Quebec for as long as he has simply not have the ability to draft a statement and just even read it phonetically out of respect for Quebecers.
So let me just put to you what the company has said in response to this reaction. In the tragic circumstances surrounding the crash of Flight AC8646, Mr. Rousseau was keen to address our customers, our employees, and those of Jazz, their families, and everyone affected by the tragedy, whether directly or indirectly. He therefore recorded a message as a matter of priority before departing on a flight for the crash site. Despite his efforts, his ability to express himself in French does not allow him to convey such a sensitive message in that language as he would wish. We have therefore used subtitles to ensure that everyone can receive his message directly. What's your response, Minister, to that?
Basically, he's saying I didn't have the time. I think it takes more time to write sub captions or captions to address your sympathies. So, listen, you know, there was an article in a newspaper in Quebec, and the title was "Tone Deaf." I think that adequately states where Quebecers reside on this issue. I think it takes more time to come up with a reason why you can't phonetically sound out a statement in French to address your clients that were affected in their language. And if we want to continue to say that we live in a bilingual country, then this was one of those opportunities where we could have shown it. And, you know, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the number of complaints Air Canada has received. As of 1 o'clock today, I think it's around 800 complaints at the Commissioner for Official Languages. So, you know, Vashi, Quebec has people in its jurisdiction complaining that things are in French on the basis that we live in a bilingual country. And here we have an example where Quebecers can't get served in their language by someone who has their headquarters on our territory. I think this is a sobering moment where we see that Canadian bilingualism isn't what we think it should be, and what it really isn't what we would like it to be. And this was an opportunity missed in my estimation.
Is there anything that he or the company could do short of resigning that would rectify this in any way in your view?
Well, I would answer that with a question. How many more incidents of his inability to address his customers in their language are we going to accept? I think the board has some serious questions to ask themselves. And the Premier of Quebec has been very clear. And both pretenders who are going to be Premier soon with our leadership race have both said that they think he should resign. I happen to agree that he shouldn't stay on. I don't think after this many offenses, after this much time, that a person living in Quebec, when we ask all of our immigrants who move to Quebec to learn French in order to be integrated in our society and to be successful, I don't see why this person should be held to a higher standard.
Just one more question for you, and I say this with as much sensitivity as possible because I've listened very closely to the very convincing case that you've just put forward. I think for people who are not in Quebec or who are not Francophone and who saw this unfold today, I guess the way that it was conveyed to me, at least on radio, you know, by a lot of listeners, was confusion that at a time when two people have lost their lives, when this investigation is active, there appears to be systemic failures that led to this awful crash to happening, that this be a focus kind of perplexes them at this moment. I wondered, Minister, if you could address that.
To those people, I would say it speaks to the inequality in the discourse with regards to official languages in Canada. It speaks to the fact that the relationship between French and English is not an equal relationship, and the fact that we're a bilingual country and Francophones throughout the country have difficulty getting service, and sometimes it impacts their health care, it impacts their ability to get jobs. Well, here we have a case where these people were from Quebec. It is a Quebec-based airline. The person lives in Quebec, and people who died were French. And so if you're not going to speak French then, I wonder what it says about Canadian bilingualism. And so if that's what people are saying bilingualism should be, well then those same people who come into Quebec and bring Quebec to court in order for things to be bilingual when all we're trying to do is protect French on a continent with 400 million Anglophones when we're 9 million Francophones, I think if we want to walk the walk, if we want to talk the talk, we got to walk the walk. And then this is an example where Air Canada failed to do that. And I think they have an obligation to be exemplary. And I think they know that. And so I'm asking them to be exemplary. I think it's one of those things where it's the least they can do to address the mourning family in French that they're sorry that these things happened to their family. And there's all kinds of reasons why that flight had the problems that it had. But the inability to convey a message of sympathy to the family in the right way is it negates the effort, I think.
Okay, I'm going to leave it on that note. Minister, thank you very much for making the time. I appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Vashi.